Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
We are rocking and rolling today, continuing our Samurai Value series, right?
Yeah.
How many of these have we done? I mean, it's been
it's
6.
quite a few.
Yeah, so if you're not caught up after you listen to this episode, go back and catch up on some of those other Samurai Values. They've been great podcasts with a lot of people have given us great feedback on those. But today,
I don't think you have to listen to them sequentially. I think they're just they're not by importance.
They're actually great reminders. So I mean, some of them might be more important to you, and they're great. Just kind of for a quick listen,
right?
But anyway, going into today we're talking about samurai loyalty.
Yes,
and loyalty is such an important an important value because we all want to feel that people are loyal to us, right? We want that feeling of support, that feeling of people have our back, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things, if you want respect, you have to give respect. I think loyalty is very much like that. So you have to be loyal. Let's say you're running a business, but you treat your employees horribly. And you do everything opposite, but you expect them to be loyal to you. Well, it's just not going to happen,
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's part of it. That's kind of the overarching thing. But like usual, we have 3 things that we think that can hone down and focus in on things that you can really work on to improve the loyalty.
And I really like loyalty because it's one of those things where I think everybody thinks they're loyal. Right? Like everybody thinks they're a good friend. Everybody thinks they're a good parent. Yep. Everybody thinks they're supportive. Yep. But I think we're going to get into some stuff in this episode that kind of can really give you that extra edge, in making you a more loyal person and, kind of making people feel more supported around you. So I think this is just a great episode.
For sure.
But let's dive into it. So number one, which we're kind of alluding to already, is just being supportive. Of people, but being supportive even when you disagree.
Yes. Yeah. And that can be difficult, for sure. And I think if you have a lot of trouble with this, you probably need to look at your ego. You probably have a big ego, or I would argue that most of the time with a big ego, you actually have a small ego. You're protecting it. And that somebody that disagrees with you, you feel like it's a personal attack.
Yeah.
That also means to me that you're not confident, So if I'm teaching somebody, and let's say I'm teaching especially a self-defense or something doing with combat, and somebody questions what I'm teaching, if I'm like, I can't believe you questioned me, I'm a 7th degree black belt, what are you talking about? Well, okay, that should be your first clue that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
If I attack you that way, right? And so just like with anybody else, if they attack you personally because you disagree with them, you got to really look at maybe their motive, maybe their actual knowledge. So if somebody's asking me questions or even saying, I don't know if that's going to work, I should be very confident saying, well, this is why it does work. And I shouldn't be offended because they're asking me a question or even questioning if the move is going to work for them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
and I mean, this goes way back to to a book that I read that you actually gave me a long time ago.
Oh yeah, it's a good book.
And it was
people are going to be like, what the heck?
Oh yeah, Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. It was a
great book.
It's a really good leadership book, and one of the quotes in there was always, disagreement is not necessarily disloyalty. And I think one of the most important things to think about with this for me is that you're going to disagree with people in your personal relationships. You're always going to have things, and those disagreements could be bigger, they could be smaller, and support isn't necessarily going along with it. Sometimes the best support you can give is giving kind of understanding what they're saying and then clearly communicating what you're saying.
Right.
Because if we're both just pulling on the knot never gets untied, right? Yep. So I think communication is such a big part of this. And it's also kind of thinking, well, when people disagree with me, they're not necessarily being a bad friend. Sometimes they're just giving me other perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's super valuable. I don't want people that just say yes sir all the time.
Right.
I don't want that. And you know that. You've been around me long enough that if I ask a question with something and I say, here's what I want to do, I want you to pick that apart. I want you to be like, I don't know, that I think this might be a better idea, or that was a good idea, but let's try this.
Yeah.
I want that because I want ultimately what is the best idea? Because I certainly don't come up with the best ideas. I think collectively we do,
Right.
so the other thing too is if you are a parent of adults now, this definitely comes up. Your adult children are going to make decisions or life things that you might disagree with. Now, of course, if it's morally wrong and it's going to hurt them, that's a little different. I'm talking like they pick this career over that career that you think is better, or they're going to this company versus that company. I've seen so often that it just ruins the relationship, and then you don't have a relationship with your adult child because you're opinionated and you're the parent. You think you know better, and maybe you do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's their life; they have to live it, And so that I think that's disloyal in a sense from the parent's perspective. Again, it obviously if it's something that's going to harm
Right.
them, it's illegal.
Yeah.
That's way different. But I'm talking about the simple things, and that is a real life example that I see, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think we see this a lot in relationships where, another one of the kind of the lessons from the book is, once you've come to a solution, like once you've reached the point of agreement, then everybody loyalty is everyone being on board,
Right.
right? And not, I told you so's when it doesn't work out,
Yes.
or,
Yep.
so I think there's so much to just being a loyal person and doing that part of like, hey, listen, we're going to disagree, but I mean, in business, how many times do you and I kind of talk about stuff, and then we come to an agreement,
Right.
and then whether it works out or not,
Right.
it's now our thing. It's
Yeah.
not like, well, that was your idea or that was my
Yeah.
idea, and it was dumb. We make a lot of
Yeah. And I
I make
see
a
that
lot of dumb
all the
ideas.
time. Yep. Yeah. Well, I see that all the time in business, all
Yeah.
the time in business, and it's so damaging to the whole culture of the business, And I think that's a great point. Okay. Anything else with number one? I think we
No,
covered what.
let take us into number two.
Okay, so number two is not. This one is going to be tough for some people,
Yeah.
and they're gonna and some people might say, well, what the heck am I going to talk about then? And this is not talking about others, and this is not talking about others negatively. I would add when they're not around. So
And
the caveat to this is if you're a leader, you do have to discuss discipline. You have to discuss your employees doing things wrong, and I would say that it's important that you talk to somebody in the company about that. So somebody that you can confide in, and it shouldn't be a B&M session where you're the B and the moaning. I think you understand what that is, right? It shouldn't
yes.
be that where you're just complaining about everything. It should be constructive. You lay out, here are the challenges with this person. Here's what we need to work on. And then from there, you come up with solutions. So that's on the business side. But I'm sure you're going to talk about the personal side with this too.
Well, I think it all just comes down to never say anything behind their back that you wouldn't say to their front.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, like, listen, if you're a friend to somebody
Yep.
and you tell them how great they are and you tell them they're a good friend and
Yep.
you enjoy their company and all that stuff, and then where I see this a ton, like, I mean, and I hate to say it, and I forgot who the writer was, but I'll have to look back. But I see this so much in marriage, right? This is
Oh,
and here's why, because like I see spouses see each other when they're together, they love each other, la la la. But
yeah.
when we're out having a beer together, it's popular to complain about your wife. It's popular to be an
Huh.
about your husband, right?
Is it?
And
Because I don't do that, and I don't think
it
you do that either.
and you shouldn't for a lot of
No.
reasons, right? There's
Oh,
so many reasons you shouldn't do that.
yeah.
But we obviously see it all the time where it's like, oh, she blah 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 or he blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And what that does is, number one, it breaks that kind of loyalty bond that you have, and
Right.
the people who are laughing at your jokes are also seeing you be a jerk.
Yeah.
But the other thing it does is it plants those seeds in your head that's reality,
Yeah.
and then it's going to make your subconscious see those things more, and it
Right.
just erodes at the relationship. So, I think really, if it's a totally different thing if, you're at work and you have a problem with an employee and you're going to talk
Right.
to a supervisor.
Yeah, for sure. For
So
sure.
that's totally different.
Yeah.
But, in your relationships, if you wouldn't say it to their face, which you can totally do respectfully. If someone's doing
Yeah.
something wrong, you can
Hmm.
go to them and say, "I have a problem with the way you did this."
Right.
But talking about people behind their back is just it's icky and it's bad for you.
Yeah, and to expand on what you're saying, I think also with your spouse is it's okay. Like if you have a close friend that you're just talking to, that's one thing, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But if you're putting your issues with your husband or your wife or whatever on social media, which I do see, what the heck? You probably you're on your third divorce, and
Yeah.
so and I wonder why, right? Maybe you look in the mirror and it's you. You're the
Yeah.
problem. You're bringing your problems to a new relationship. In a couple of years, the same things are going to happen. I mean, that's really what it is, and that might be a harsh reality, but it is the reality.
Well, and it's one of the things that I talk to my kids about all the time is the things you do within the four, because there's obviously things you do within the four walls of your house that you don't do out
Yeah,
in public,
yeah,
right? But I always say the things you do within the four walls of your house, you have to be very careful to not let that kind of leak, because what will happen is the more you do it, you take cursing and bad language, right?
yeah,
Like we try to use minimal bad language in our house,
yeah.
right? Because we know that if it becomes part of the language of the house,
It does.
it's going to leak out into the world, right? And I don't
Yep,
want people to think my kids are uneducated or to think they're bad kids, so.
yep,
And I think the same thing goes for gossiping and talking about people, is the more you do it, the more likely it's going to start to come out when you're with the person, and the more
yep.
likely it's going to damage that relationship. So,
Yeah, and another part of this too, just thinking like I mentioned in the first one, if you have adult children like I do, is not talking about their mother or, in my case, or
oh
their
boy.
father in a negative way. And even if you're divorced, now we're together, we've been together for 30 years, so that's not an issue. But let's say we weren't together, I shouldn't be, even to my adult children, talking about their mother in a negative way. I mean, that's just wrong to do. And grow up. I mean, that, let me
Yeah.
give you a real reality. Grow up and not say that stuff. I mean, if you're divorced, you're talk to a professional or talk to a friend, but don't talk to your kids about that, because that's their relationship is their relationship, and it shouldn't have anything to do with yours
Yeah.
and how it went bad. You know what I mean? So
Uh-huh.
that is part of loyalty as well, because it's
Yeah.
their mother or their father, and even if they're pieces of garbage, I think you need to be careful with that.
And
So
and like, listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you say, "Oh, I never do that," I give you a ton of credit, because I
yeah,
think this is one of those things
yeah,
that it's just so easy to fall into that little
yeah,
trap. So
yeah, for sure.
just something you can continue to work on. And
Yeah,
then number three, I think is especially when it comes to children and friends,
hmm,
but being loyal to the results they're trying to get.
right.
And the cap on this, and the most important part is, even when it doesn't benefit you
Yeah,
directly.
yeah, yeah. That's the big one. And when we were first coming up with the three things, this one was one of this was the last one, and we didn't really explore it fully. We're like, yeah, maybe we should pick something else. Maybe we should do a different one. But then we explored it a little bit more, and we added that ending, that caveat of, even if it doesn't benefit you. And I think this reminds me of, I employ a lot of teenagers. This is oftentimes their first job, part-time instructor, and 99% of the time, I'm going to have them for a couple of years, and then they're going to go off to college or start a full career. Some of them stay, some of them come back like you, McGarvey, and things like that. But oftentimes they're going. So if I'm like, no, I don't want you to go, and I'm not supporting you to go into college, and you don't know, you should stay here, that would be wrong of me, right?
Yeah.
I have to be, and there's been some really, really good instructors that I hated to lose, and I'm like, oh man, they're going to be tough to replace, right? And you know this because you've been with me a long, long time. You were one of them. Yeah. You were one of them back that when you went to college. I'm like, how am I going to replace this guy? So, and I think, and you can speak of this, how you felt with me, but I think you felt supportive. I hope, and I hope you thought I wanted the best for you. And I think that's so important to do because it didn't benefit me. It does now. No, but initially, you going to college and you starting your own career, it didn't benefit the dojo. It didn't benefit me. It didn't bring more income to the dojo. But because I did that, now what do I have? I have you back.
Right. Well, right. And I think that's one of the lessons, right? Is, there's so many things in life that we do, and I talk to my agents about this. I talk to, a lot of people about this, and I say, there's so many things we do that doesn't have a visible benefit that's right in front of us from the thing we're doing.
Right.
But a lot of times the benefit comes in, this is that big picture thinking, right? I'm supportive now, and I'm not doing it because I want something in the big picture.
Right.
But because listen, you being supportive to me could turn into, something coming back to you from somewhere completely different.
Right.
But I think, we live in that world where we always talk about, crabs in a bucket and how, we're scared to let people that we love move on, and I think this is being loyal to somebody's goals can be anything from, hey, somebody said that, they really are trying to get healthy, and when you go out to dinner with them, not telling them to order the salad, but ordering the salad yourself so they feel more comfortable. So they, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's so many little things you can do just to help support your friends' goals. That really show that you have their back. And I think what you said is exactly right. You had my back when I left the dojo and went to college, and here we are in a even cooler place than we might have been.
For sure.
But I think just having those people's back for that is such a cool skill to develop.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's something it's certainly not easy to do, especially, if you put a lot of time into your people, and I think that would go with any business, they have to be loyal to themselves and what's best for their family, so that's the attitude that I had to learn to adopt. That, okay, if I was in their shoes, what would I do? Am I able to give them all that they need? Maybe they want to move to a different area. Well, I can't just pick up the dojo and leave, maybe they want to go down south. Well, then they have to do that. And that's what's best for them. And oftentimes they come back, or at the very least, I have great relationships all throughout the country that I can, continue to improve. And then who knows, they come back sometimes too.
A lot of which we've had on the podcast.
Yes, we have.
A lot of those relationships we've had on the podcast. So, I mean, that's testament to how this works, and I think it's always hard to think, a lot of times we focus on what we're losing and we don't focus on what they're gaining.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important value because you're going to live a happier life.
Yes, for sure.
Because if all we're focused on is what we're losing, it's not a good way to live. So anyway, let's wrap back through these steps. Okay. I think this it's funny because this was a tough one to kind of formulate the podcast, but I think I love the stuff that came out of it. So number one, being supportive of people, even when you disagree, and when you come to that agreement, make sure you're supportive the whole way along.
Right. Number two is not talking about people when they're not around. I like what you said is if you don't feel comfortable saying it to their face, don't say it to their back. I like that little saying, and it is so true. So that one's probably a tough one for many people, but a very important one.
Absolutely. And then the last one, being loyal to the results they want, even when it doesn't benefit you. So understanding what your friends' goals are, what your family's goals are, and just doing things to support those, even when there's no, real return to you on it, other than, deeper friendships and relationships.
Right.
And that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Please share this with somebody who would get value from it, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.